Well, let's talk a little bit more about this. We're joined now by Shelina Janmohamed, who's a commentator on British Islam and Muslim women and author of Love in a Headscarf. Shelina Janmohamed, I mean, in the West we tend to think of marriage as being between two people, but in Pakistan it's much more a family affair, isn't it? I mean, does that help us understand the motives behind these kind of attacks?
Well, I think it is worth explaining to people that although marriage is about the two people, families are really heavily involved. And there is an idea that the families coming together is part of that marriage. So it's quite disheartening to see something that's all about family values in a culture that's all about family using the barrel of a gun to resolve family feud. And we don't know quite what it's about, but, you know, our thoughts and prayers go to the family who've been affected by this.
Yes, of course. And would diaspora Pakistanis, those, for instance, who live in Britain, would they have a different outlook, that perhaps they're seen as being less attached to customs than their Pakistani relatives who remained in Asia?
Well, I think it's worth pointing out that this is still relatively unusual, and I would have thought most of the Pakistani and Asian community will be quite horrified by seeing this happen.
Of course.
I think there's no doubt that living in Britain and growing up here, people become accustomed to perhaps a more individualistic way of approaching marriage, the families being less involved, and ideas that maybe families don't need to be so close, which is more of a European idea around marriage.
I mean, the Quran doesn't tell you who you should marry, does it? It tells you who you shouldn't. It tells you who you shouldn't marry, like your mother's brother, that kind of thing. So this kind of crime, when it does happen, it doesn't happen very often, as you say, doesn't necessarily have its roots in Islam at all.
No, and it's really important that people are clear that that forced marriage is something that's completely antithetical to the Islamic worldview. Anything that's forced is not permitted. And then when you read about forced marriage, the kind of thing that comes with it is honour killing. That's the next step along the conveyor belt. And that, of course, is completely forbidden. It's a horrific idea that somebody should take the brunt of what's considered shameful or considered bad, because everybody has a right to determine the way that they live their lives, who they marry, and whether they choose to end that marriage or not.
Of course, you bring up these twin concepts of shame and honour, which we do see as being very important in Muslim societies. And so does that mean that the divorce that is obviously taking place within this family is something which would be seen as bringing a shame, a stain on the family?
Well, I think it's important to be clear that this is not about Muslims and not about Islam, because we see shame and honour across a lot of cultures. And I think if we want to put an end to things like honour killings, we have to unpick those two, because there's some really good things about the ideas of marriage in Islam, but honour which comes in cultures, some of which are related to Muslims, is a bad thing, and we need to separate that out. So we allow people to marry who they want, and if they want to marry somebody from their family, I think that's entirely up to them. But if a woman in particular is forced into that situation, or even a man, and can't escape if they want to, then that's wrong to address.
Shelina Janmohamed, thank you very much indeed for talking to us. Thank you. Now,